Hey everyone, it's Spencer here at nichepursuits.com, and today I'm happy to share with you an interview that I recently did with Jon Cooper. Jon is the owner of the site pointblankseo.com, and he also happens to be a student at the University of Florida right now studying business finance, which is also the degree that I got as well. However, Jon has quickly established himself as a link building expert over the past couple of years. And his link building resources page on Point Blank SEO is actually one that I refer to a lot. Jon was willing to spend a few minutes with me and discuss some link building tactics that are working for him right now and some thoughts on the future of link building. Overall, I hope that you pick up a few ideas that work well for you as you build links to your own websites. So enjoy the show.
Welcome to the Niche Pursuits Podcast. Are you ready to discover some niche business ideas that actually work? Well, it's time for a motivational kick to jumpstart your next big idea. Here's your host, Spencer Haas.
Hey everyone, welcome to another Niche Pursuits Podcast. I have Jon Cooper on the call with us today. Jon, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, it's great to have you here. I've mentioned you a number of times on my blog actually already in regards to link building. You're quite well known for your strategies with link building and other things. And we're going to dive into that. But before we do, I wanted to get just a little bit of your background so we can get to know you. What were you doing before you ever created pointblankseo.com?
Yeah, so I got into SEO and more broadly digital marketing about 4 years ago now. I was in high school at the time, and I got a job working for my neighbor who had a website, and she needed some SEO done. So I kind of researched it, kind of really got into it, and after a little bit, I started doing a lot of kind of my own sites and started experimenting on my own, which then eventually led to Point Blank SEO, which at the time it was more so just a project to test some different things out on a live blog. So obviously there's different aspects of doing SEO for a blog as for like a static site that just has like 10, 15 articles, kind of like a traditional niche site. And so it was more so for testing. And then once I realized people are reading it, I just kind of went with it and started kind of putting more effort and time into it and took it seriously.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And so that kind of answers the other question of, why did you create the site in the first place? It sounds like it was almost more of an experiment to start, at least.
Yeah.
But then it, as you saw that it was gaining momentum, you said, "What the heck? I've got a market here. Let's build this out." Right?
Exactly. It was very much just kind of like a thing of passion at the beginning. It was just I wanted to test some stuff. It was fun keeping all my notes kind of in a live place online, and it was really nothing more than that until I obviously set up Google Analytics, and once I started seeing traffic in about late 2011, I said, you know what? Let's give this thing a shot, and relaunched in early 2012, and then it just kind of became a beast of its own. So,
yeah, I love that. I mean, that's really the way it should be, right? I mean, you build something that you're passionate about, and basically putting down things that are important to you, and as you do that, other people see that's important, and makes a good case study, I guess, in and of itself as well for how to get natural traffic and natural links and things like that. So well done there.
Yeah, thanks.
So, what's always interesting about your story, at least sort of the subplot of your story, if you will, is that, you're still a student right now at the University of Florida, right?
Yeah, I am a sophomore in the undergrad school, business school at University of Florida.
Okay, and so you're very young when it comes to terms of a lot of people in the industry. As far as age, you don't have 5-10 years or whatever that some people with business backgrounds have been doing this for a very long time. But you're young in the industry, but you've shown a lot of knowledge and expertise in the area of link building that we're going to go into here. But so you're at the University of Florida studying business, but part of that, part of the success that I see that you're having on your site, I look at that and say, well, why study business at the University of Florida? Why not go out on your own and build a full-time income? What do you say about that?
Yeah, so after my first semester, my freshman year, I did take a semester off because I didn't know if I wanted to drop out or not. And eventually went back just because I thought, I could probably do it at both at the same time. Because I was actually initially studying engineering, and that was just a lot of work, and I got frustrated really quickly. So I actually re-entered in business school, and I'm now doing business finance. I mean, honestly, the workload's been very minimal, and I realized that I could pretty much easily do both at the same time and kind of get the best of both worlds. So I get um, the benefits of still being in school, and even though the degree isn't really important to me nearly as much as some other people, there's a lot of advantages with being labeled as like a full-time student, and a lot more sympathy from other people. A lot of people seem a lot more interested in my story when I say I'm also a student at University of Florida and whatnot. So it initially was an issue like that, but I realized that I could kind of make them both work. But also, so the question is, why don't I just kind of, do a full-time SEO business? And I realized that my goal long term, I don't really see my goal being starting an SEO agency or anything like that. And, kind of like, like a Seer Interactive or one of those agencies and try and build it up over time. Just because I do like SEO and it is something that I'm passionate about, but I also like a lot of other aspects of business just as much. And it's also just a lot more fun to do a lot of other aspects of business, not just like one core focus, just because it's kind of interesting to do multiple things at once and learn keeping up with different things. And so I realized that like longer term, I'm trying to invest in some bigger projects and bigger site projects, whether that's running a kind of more authority site on my own, or if it's partnering with some people on some different other ventures and stuff. So even if I was in school, I don't see myself trying to build out an agency long term.
Sure. No, that's awesome. And, I asked that question. I'm not trying to encourage you to drop out of college or anything like that. But, if the opportunity is there to build a business, a lot of people would say, why not? But for your own information, people listening out there, I actually graduated in college with a degree in business finance as well. So not such a bad choice there either. So you're right. The degree, I mean, at this point in my career, the degree means basically nothing, to me. But that's okay. I went to 4 years of university. I actually went to graduate school, got my MBA as well, and was in the corporate world for 7 or 8 years. And the experience was great, and I learned a ton. I mean, really, the whole education throughout both university and my corporate career, I learned so many things that I think I internalize now that I don't even realize maybe I picked up along the way. So the experiences are very valuable. So I think you're right that you can do both. You don't need to go out and try to build a $1 million business right now. You have a couple more years of college, and then if the time is right and you can do something full time, then I think you've got a lot of great experience to draw on.
Yeah.
So you did mention here that before you started Point Blank SEO, you built a few either niche sites or other sites. Are you still building out some of your own either niche sites or more authority sites outside of Point Blank SEO?
Yeah, so I started off doing niche sites just because, and I'm glad I can finally touch on this and kind of speak about kind of niche sites and my perspective on them.
Yeah, please.
So a lot of people are attracted to the idea of niche sites just because, when you hear those big success stories of guys making 5-6 figures a month off these, big authority sites, sometimes it's hard to believe, and it's kind of hard to convince yourself that that's something that you can do. Just because, to a lot of people, and to really anybody, that's a lot of money. And for it to be, found in such a way, like with the internet and whatnot, it just seemed kind of hard to believe. And so when the whole idea of niche sites were introduced, I think it caught on just because a lot of people thought, like, that's a manageable thing that they can do. It's believable, and I think I can go and get it just because it's not too far stretched. And so, getting into it early, I realized that I definitely fell into that. I definitely thought, hey, I can do that. A site making $400 or $500 a month, that seems manageable. I can do that. And so I did build out some niche sites, but I wouldn't say quickly realized, but I did realize over time that a lot of the more profitable ventures out there and a lot of the more competitive spaces, in terms of the difference between income that you can make and the difference between the time and effort you put in, it's really not big enough to justify putting all that time and effort into a niche site when you can put in just a little bit more effort into a more authority site and yield multiples of income of what niche sites are.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, this trend, I think it's increasing in that way, because I think niche sites were originally kind of around and awesome for people who saw it as the most profitable way to make money was because they could be scaled in a way in a lot of aspects that basically allowed it to be very automated to where niche sites and just kind of like the growth of the internet is going and continuing to trend. It's you're having to put a lot more time and effort into niche sites than you did 6 years ago. And I bet you can speak to this, Spencer. I know you build out a lot of niche sites. I mean, it's definitely not the same ball game.
Absolutely.
Content used to be a thing where you could outsource it to text broker, just slap some content on it, 500-600 word articles. Then you could throw a few different link building packages out there and watch it rank for 2 to 3 years. And that was kind of the original idea. They kind of made niche sites beautiful for what it was for the people it was right for.
Yep.
But I think that it's really trended in the other way. Today, I mean, you're talking about in a lot of your niche series type stuff that you should be creating content that really attracts links and just is generally more quality. And I think that fundamentally goes against what niche sites were supposed to be, which was supposed to be low effort, low time, and really high quality content, which is kind of what you need for any site now, is not characterized by something that's low time investment, low effort. And so therefore I kind of realized that the overhead, time and effort costs were increasing over time for no matter what site you're building out. And that's just the content side. Like we haven't even gone to the link building side, which has obviously changed drastically. But I realized that these overhead costs were increasing over time. So I thought, if I'm going to build out sites, if I'm going to put this much time and effort into them, why go for some low hanging fruit that, for a goal for a niche site is maybe $500 or $600 a month for a lot of people. Whereas I could build out some more authority sites, put in a little bit more extra time and effort, but actually go after those bigger opportunities that were once kind of hard to believe, but once you kind of understand the amount of opportunities out there, it really is graspable. So
right.
Yeah.
No, yeah, very, very well said. I actually agree with what you say. People listening in maybe think I'm going to jump in and defend niche sites, if you will. But I actually agree with what you're saying. There definitely was a point in time, 4 years ago or whatever, certainly when I first got started, the point was to scale a lot of niche sites very quickly. Doing exactly what you said. You could get content a little bit cheaper. The sites could be small. You could, buy a particular link package or whatever, and it was hands off. You just did that, and then you repeated the process over and over again, and it worked very well for me. I will say that niche sites was 100% of my income, and is what led me to quitting my job a couple of 2.5, 3 years ago. So the money was very good if you knew what you're doing. But there's been a lot of changes since then, and I've spoken a lot about this on my blog, of course. And now when I'm doing my niche site projects, my case studies that you referred to, the process is different. I'm not, talking about building, dozens and dozens of these and, automating the process and things like that. It almost has gotten to a point where you have to be more careful with what you're building. The quality has to be better, and so on and so forth. So what I say, or what I recommend that people do in regards to niche sites is to use them either as a testing ground, or if you're just getting started, it would be okay to maybe build 2 or 3 niche sites just to learn the entire process of building a website, learning the process of keyword research, of going through all the hoops of setting up hosting and WordPress and plugins. Use it as a training ground. So that's kind of my recommendation is people build maybe 2 or 3 niche sites if you're just getting started, and at that point you should try to find one larger project, niche, passion that you have that you can work on long term. So niche sites have their place, but I actually agree that long term building a large authority site really is the way to go. Now the one other thing that I will say about niche sites is that if you want to be a little bit more risky and participate in the things that are very high risk in regards to the fact that they're practices that maybe Google doesn't fully approve of, you can still try to take some shortcuts, but that should be a minimal part of your website portfolio, if you will, and you should be aware of the risks. So that's my thoughts on
Definitely. I mean, all I'd say is I'm not trying to diss niche sites because I know for a lot of people they are very profitable and they still are.
Right.
I'm just saying I'd rather be on the right side of the trends. But also, as you said, like they're great for testing. If you're new in this, why invest into a bigger project just to find out, you actually didn't understand these things. There's a lot more to lose in terms of your time, which is really the most valuable thing at the end of the day. And so don't invest a lot of it into your first project trying to build out some, mega health site or something like that.
Right.
Start with something small, manageable, understand all those aspects.
Yeah.
But also, I mean, the thing about niche sites is, or just any site that you're building out is, like, once you define your business goals, I think it's a lot easier a decision to make. Just because, your strategy, if you're building out a niche site, if you're just building out a couple versus, let's say 50 or even 100, because I know there are people out there who do build niche sites in those kind of numbers, the strategies are definitely very different. Obviously you can't do everything manually for 50 niche sites. So you're going to have to figure out how to scale some things, but you don't necessarily have to make them as long-term as, we ideally like them to be. If you can get 50 niche sites ranking for 12 months, with a process that's very scaled, obviously you wouldn't be doing probably the most Google approved things. You'd probably do some more link building package type stuff for the stuff that you have found that still works.
Right.
But I mean, like even down to link building, the type of link building that you do is definitely going to differ based off of your business goals. And then we'll kind of talk about that in a little bit when we talk into kind of link building strategies for niche sites.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, when it comes down to it, people do have different business strategies, and I still dabble around with niche sites, but and I will probably continue to do that to either test markets or just because I know I want to test different link building strategies or I want to do
Definitely.
different things. But long term, I think everybody probably needs to have sort of a core, larger type project or website that they can work on. And I think that's where some people maybe miss the boat is they have 100%, if we're looking at it from an investment perspective, they have 100% of their portfolio in one type of risky asset, niche websites. And that's just bad because if that sort of strategy gets crushed by Google, 100% of your income is gone. But if you have that diversification with a larger site or maybe a software product that you've developed or some other type of business, you're not as likely to lose out on that portion of your income. So it's just smart to diversify and be aware of what's going on out there.
Yeah, I mean, just one thing I want to touch on is I remember reading a post on I think it was Smart Passive Income, Pat Flynn, and he asked a simple question, which is, would you guys rather have 10 sites making $200 a month or one site making $2,000 a month? Which is basically the same income, but you could have 10 sites making that income or you could have one site. And a lot of people, there's this general idea that you should diversify in, they think it'd be less risky to have 10 sites instead of one. But I strongly disagree with this. And I think that's why a lot of people like to build a niche sites because they kind of want to spread themselves out. They want to diversify their income. But the truth is, like, to increase your revenue like 50%, you could work on one site and increasing it 50% or working on 10 sites. And that's generally going to be a lot more work as time goes on just because you have to do a lot of things manually. And as well as you can't really invest and focus and really kind of get the intangible benefits of trying to work in one space versus trying to work in 10 different spaces and understanding all the different nuances of competitors, webmasters in that space and whatnot. So I don't think I best explained it, but I think that you need to, if you're trying to build a lot of sites to diversify your income, I think you need to rethink whether or not that's actually the best mode. Even though a lot of people say it's better to have don't have all your eggs in one basket, but I mean, like, the way things are going from consumer pickiness to Google, trying to see quality aspects of a website, I mean, you can't really do that at scale. So it's riskier to try and do it at scale than it is to try and do it on maybe one or two sites. So.
Yeah, no, I completely understand your point there, and I agree. I think that it is a lot easier to scale one property to have more industry knowledge in that particular space that you may be in versus 10 or 15 or 20. You really can't manage one person be involved in 20 different niches. It just doesn't make sense. So
Yeah.
So very well said. I do want to dig into some actual link building strategies, and maybe we're going to do this in kind of a couple of phases because there are a lot of new people out there that are just getting started, and I am doing some niche site case studies on my blog. So people want to know how to build links for maybe a smaller niche site, one that they just built, a brand new one. Are there some Maybe give us an overview of what sort of your best strategies or your best ideas for some basic general link building for niche sites.
Yeah, definitely. So, basically, I just want to start off saying that your strategy for in terms of how you're going to build links is going to greatly differ if your end goal is trying to create 50 niche sites versus 2 niche sites, because with 50 niche sites, I mean, you really can't do the manual stuff at scale because it just really doesn't scale. And so let's say for that strategy, you might try and find some general link opportunities that you can get to any site and kind of try and build up your own little black book of basically sites you can drop links on, because that's the only way you can really scale really niche link building. But for if you're just starting a new site or whatnot, I mean, there's a few different things that you can do. So there's the obvious of just trying to find any type of niche relevant directories, which there's probably not going to be very many, but there's hopefully usually a few that you can get a link on. So that's one place to start. I'd also recommend monitoring blogs and looking for blogs that are talking about that's relevant to whatever it is your niche is in, and trying to monitor for posts that mention your keywords, and trying to leave a comment on those posts with a link, even though it's no follow. So just blog comments on articles about whatever keyword you're targeting. And Google has their own blog search, which is a good tool to just type in your keyword and find all blog posts kind of mentioned in the last 1 to 30 days of that time.
How effective do you feel like blog commenting is as far as a link building strategy?
Yeah, I don't think it's huge, but I think with niche sites, I mean, you're going to want to do your best to diversify, solely because I've definitely, for the sites that I've tested out on, I might find something that works, and so I try and just do kind of like a lot of that in the rank. But then one little nuance of one little update could really kind of hurt that type of link. And so I've realized that when I try and build like 3 or 4 or 5 different types of links, when those little nuances hit and I move back 3 spots instead of 30, I realize that that's probably the best option to go. So gotcha. I wouldn't say blog comments, this kind of blog commenting is going to be your bread and butter. But I think it's something that you should just kind of sprinkle in with the rest of your strategy, especially if you just have a few sites. And as well as just looking for general sites that you can just drop a link on. And so sites like aboutus.org, you can register or basically create a profile for your domain. You can add a little bit of information, and then you can actually get that link to be do follow. And I know that domain authority is like 70 or 80 or something like that. And so there's just like really a handful of sites that you'll come across to where you can just get a link to for really any site, mainly because you can create a profile, or you can leave a comment, or you can, just submit a link. I mean, there's just, you're going to come across these opportunities to where you can just get a link without really too much trouble. And so it's about kind of looking for those opportunities, doing a few blog comments here and there, trying to find any type of niche relevant directories, and basically just going down the list, because there's lots of lists of link building strategies across the web. I published one on my own site, and so there's just like a lot of really specific small ways to get links and just kind of trying to build up maybe one or two from each, really.
Yeah, no, I think that's good, and I've actually linked to your link building strategies page where you've listed I don't know 200 or so different strategies that people can follow, and so yeah, that makes complete sense to me. There's a lot of these either resource type pages where you can submit your website as a resource, or the profile links that you mentioned. These places where you can essentially just submit your link or your information and get that back to your niche site. That's a great way to start. Any other sort of low hanging fruit or strategy that you would consider for the basic niche site there?
Yeah, so I realized that probably the first step you should be doing is really researching your competitors. That should really be the foundation. I always skip over it because it's kind of like second nature to me that when I start out doing any type of link building project, it's obviously looking at competitors. So a fair amount of people do understand this concept of just look at other sites ranking, especially other niche sites that are ranking for your same keywords, see how they're getting links, get the same links, and just optimize better on site.
Yep.
But also something that very few people kind of understand and grasp is that even if there aren't other sites in your space that are like direct competitors that are have the same business model, which is just building a small site and getting links to it, there are a lot of other sites, a lot of other people building niche sites and having the exact same issues you're having, and so you can learn a lot from other people in other spaces. So what I would really recommend is look for niche sites, not just in your space, but really any space. See how they're getting links. Sometimes you might find some, exact copyable prospects. So you might find that they're getting link drops on some, random general site that you can get the same links from. But more so, look for those broader takeaways of links that they're getting and see if you can apply the same kind of ideas to your site. So even though this isn't really direct competitor research, I call it like indirect competitor research. And it's basically how I do a lot of projects, not just niche sites, but for my bigger authority sites. So let's say if I've got an e-commerce site that I work on, I do a lot of research at looking at other e-commerce sites in other spaces because we are both trying to build links to, let's say, our product or category pages. In the way that we can do it, I can learn a lot from other people in other spaces. So even though those aren't direct opportunities that I can kind of take advantage of, it's really instrumental in terms of how I've learned to build links, solving these same problems just because other people have had them.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And in fact, I've done that. Looked at competitors, well, not direct competitors, but other niche site builders or just other people in other spaces. Not only to look at some of the links, which I have done, but also it's been interesting to find maybe other niche ideas completely or other content ideas completely.
Yep.
I've been able to find niches a number of times by looking at different link profiles and who's linking to who. Essentially you find out that, hey, this guy, person A is also building a site in niche, B and C. And those are good niches to go into as well. So it also works for good niche research, low-hanging fruit, low competition markets that perhaps you can target as well. So great point there. So let's maybe up the ante here a little bit. So we've got some basic link building that you can do for niche sites. You can really do for any type of site. What do you do differently for a larger authority type site? What is either your bread and butter, or what should people focus on to get really great links to their larger long-term project sites?
Yeah, so one thing, if you notice, I didn't touch on for niche site link building was really just like general outreach of, for like resource pages. It could be really any type of opportunity where you're actually even reaching out to a person, because again, kind of the model of a niche site isn't to build up this like really super high quality site, because then the return on investment wouldn't be that much in terms of the time you're investing into it. But for a more authority site, I mean, you can really invest into these bigger things that a lot of these marketing blogs talk about. The whole create great content and everybody loves and make everybody love your brand and stuff like that. So you can actually really invest in these things and get the real benefits out of them, because a thing about like creating like truly high quality content and just other aspects that, kind of like a real company does, that a few people have said is it's really not something that you can half-ass. And so if you really try and half-ass it for a site, which is something that if you try to do it for a niche site, you probably end up half-assing it. But it's not something you can half-ass just because you really have to invest a lot of time and effort to it. So
Right.
for bigger authority sites, you can invest this time and effort. And so the way that they've differed for me is for authority sites, some things that I've done is researching, like doing some real in-depth content research. I'm seeing like the most linked to content in my space. I can really dive into. I do a lot of dead content recreation, which is basically looking for old content that got a lot of links to it, recreating it, and then getting the same links to it. And that's usually like a lengthier process, but because it's an authority site, I can really invest into it. And there's just a lot of other things that you can do for a bigger authority site. For me, so I've got a pretty big e-commerce site that I've been working on for about over a year now.
Okay.
And so some of the things I've been able to do for it that's really scaled well is there are lots of pages on the web that list off different discounts to different online stores.
Right.
And so a lot of these are general opportunities. You don't really have to be as long as your products are like family friendly. So if you're like adult products or something like that, or like gambling products or something like
Right.
that, then you can really get links from like a university's discount page. But if you've got like family friendly products, then you can get a lot of these types of links. But with those, you're signing contracts and stuff like that to say that you're going to hold a discount. But that's something that I'm willing to do on authority site. Other things that I've done that have scaled well is so we actually drop ship products, and so we actually carry a lot of different brands.
Mm-hmm.
We carry about 300 to 400 brands total.
Okay.
And so as a result, there's a lot of those brands actually have their own websites, and they list off different online stores that you can buy their products at. And so those are really low-hanging fruit for that, just because I just reach out to them and say, hey, we sell your products. We just want to add a link to us. And they do it. And we actually sometimes get links directly to category or product pages for their specific brands. And so those deep links are really, really helpful.
Yeah. So let me back up to the previous strategy that you mentioned.
I'm sorry.
The discount, the coupon discounts that you mentioned. Now, did you say that you are looking at like universities that are offering these discounts, and you're getting? Is that what you said?
Yeah. So the universities are a big portion.
Okay.
So if anybody goes to Google and they type in something like student discount program or employee discount program, you are going to find some different there's a good portion of them that are EDUs. But just they could be like regular businesses, they could be organizations and stuff. And if you're a member or a student with them, then you get access to this program that gives you discounts on stuff. And a lot of times they'll list those discount pages publicly. They might not list the codes to actually get the discount, but they'll link out to all the different businesses that offers those discounts.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Okay, very cool. Yeah. I can see that could be pretty effective, and it really wouldn't be that hard if your website, truly is offering that discount, obviously. So, which is again going to be the difference between having a small niche site, which really are not offering any sort of product, to a larger site where you actually are selling the product. So, no, that makes sense. What else you got? Let's see. Let's dig another nice strategy out of you.
Okay.
I know there's a ton, obviously, but maybe you can give us one more.
Okay, so I'm really into e-commerce right now, and so I hate to keep touching on e-commerce, but that's 2 of the 3 bigger authority sites I'm building right now. And there's just e-commerce versus, let's say, like a more content-heavy site is going to be a lot different in terms of the strategy you do. But something I do, so for that big authority site that I have, we've actually got some categories that have enough products in them to where we actually have competitors just for those categories. So we have competitors that are just carrying that category of product. And so these are kind of like more niche e-commerce sites, I'd kind of say. But I've also realized that I could do competitor research on a category level and not just like a top level like of that main type of, like, let's say if it's health products. So I could initially do competitor research on just looking at people selling general health products. But if we're selling, let's say, health supplements, then I can look at all the different sites that are just selling health supplements and get links to my category pages, doing competitor research that way. And so even though that's just competitor research, but honestly, that is probably going to be your most lucrative way of getting links because there's just so much opportunity.
Yeah.
Because like honestly, the prospecting that I do for link opportunities, no matter what type of opportunity they are, I'd say about 80 to 90% of the time, I'm not actually doing like raw prospecting, which is like, typing like an advanced query into Google, then, scraping the results, and then, going from there. I use Ahrefs, which is a competitor to Open Site Explorer. And that's actually the tool that I use again for like 80 to 90% of my prospecting.
Okay.
I just basically follow the link trail of different pages and kind of, whether it's competitor research or not.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I mean, there's a wealth of information out there, really, when you can see what links are pointing to every website out there. There's just a depth of different links, opportunities, everything. So that makes sense. And yes, I'm familiar with Ahrefs as well. So we'll link to that here after the interview. So it sounds like you got a couple of different projects that you're working on. Hope you don't mind if I ask, but you've got the e-commerce site, and then it sounded like a couple of other maybe more content-heavy sites. How are they going? I mean, how are those projects moving along for you?
Yeah, so I basically narrowed it down to about three pretty big authority sites. I also do a little bit of consulting, but right now I'm kind of seeing that set up and trying to not take on very many clients. I'm still I honestly don't know what I'm going to do. I could be in a completely different spot 6 months from now.
Right.
But with the authority sites that I'm building, so I've got a generally large size e-commerce site that I've been working on for the last year. It was very slow going in the beginning. The guy came to me, he found me through my blog, and he wanted to partner up with me on the site. And he was doing about $1,000 a month in revenue. He just basically launched it. He had all the connections in the industry to get the supplier set up.
Okay.
And he was doing maybe 30, 40 visits a day. And so a year later, we're nowhere near where we want to be. But we made progress. We're now at about 400 hits a day after really only about 2 months of link building that I did.
Nice.
Because I realized shortly in that the on-site was just terrible. The way he categorized stuff was just like it was bad. It wasn't his fault. It was just a massive project for him to do, and he was really eager to get it up and going. So for the last like 4 or 5 months, I've been doing a ton of on-site architecture, and we're actually relaunching the site in about a couple weeks. Finally, it's going to be live.
Okay, cool.
I've been waiting for that for forever, but that's going to drastically help the on-site SEO and the conversions. And we're currently doing about $5,000 to $6,000 in revenue, but I'm pretty confident that that's going to be about 3x in about 6 months.
Awesome.
So I've been very big on that project. It's got a huge ceiling to grow. And interestingly enough, so I initially got into his vertical really sparked interest to me because it was probably not the best way to make decisions. But I kind of made my decision based off the fact that I could get a ton of great links to the site.
Yeah.
There was just so much opportunity from so many different spectrums that I realized, again, I just talked about discounts. I can get a ton of discount links. There were so many different content opportunities. There was a lot of competitors, which might sound like, why would you get into it? There's so many competitors. But they were like medium level competition. So there was no big, huge authority site. But there's so many different category keywords. There's so many different product keywords and so many different top level keywords that there's just so much opportunity from an SEO perspective. And luckily the space was actually it's going to be lucrative, and there's definitely an opportunity to make a lot of money. But so if I did it a second time, I probably would have done a lot more research into could I actually make good money ranking for these terms and stuff like that, and actually bringing in the traffic. But luckily, yes.
Right.
So that's the first project.
Cool.
The second project is another site I partnered on. It's a lead generation site in the education space, which is a very competitive space, and it's very broad. But it's been doing okay. It's been moving very slowly, and we don't know whether we should kind of call it a day and move on to the next space, just because the guy's really smart. He's got a lot of connections in different lead gen spaces. And so I'm going to play that one by ear for the next 6 months or so. And then a third and final one is another e-commerce space. It's a very specific product. It's a very interesting. I can't really talk much about it just because my partners are very NDA focused. But
Sure.
between those three things, and then my agency side, it's definitely kept me busy with that in school.
Yeah, no, it sounds like it. So it'll be probably a relief once you're actually out of school and you can hopefully do this stuff full time, right?
Yeah, that's the plan.
So that would be awesome. So, um, boy, I could ask you a ton of questions, and you know what? Maybe I will, because
Go ahead.
I know there are a lot of people out there that are building more content focused, just blogs, if you will.
Hmm.
And so I want to touch on maybe some strategies specifically for blogs. Like even in my case, I'm working on a larger project that I haven't really shared on my own blog. I have my business blog, but I am working on another blog in a completely different niche that I haven't really shared with a partner and we have some big plans for that. But right now, it's just all content focused. We have actually done almost zero link building. I've gone out and reached out to a couple other, on blogs, left comments and things like that. But
Yeah.
I haven't really even tried to do any link building. We're basically publishing content daily on there, so there's a lot of great content. And because luckily I'm good at keyword research, we're getting 600-700 hits a day,
Nice.
and it's growing already with no link building. But we could do a lot more. So maybe use my example and lots of other people out there that are building content, blogs. What's maybe a good link bait strategy or overall, sort of good strategy that will work for a general blog?
Yeah. So for blogs, link building is a lot. It's a lot different of a beast than
Yeah.
like your average niche site or even like one of my e-commerce sites. Just because, especially let's say if you're in tech. I mean, so if you have a tech blog, your competitors are generally going to be some guys who definitely get their fair share of links each month just because they publish content and because it's on something interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So doing traditional link building where you're doing like outreach and like broken link building type stuff, I mean, that's not going to really work. It's not going to scale well for a blog when your competitors are building natural links by the hundreds each month.
Right.
And so a lot of the link building things that you're doing for a blog, again, it's going to differ based on your space. It's going to differ based on the amount of opportunity there is for manual stuff as well as the amount of competition.
Yeah.
If your competitor blogs don't have more than like 100 linking, couple hundred linking root domains, then that's something that you can attack from a meetup perspective, which is doing a lot of outreach. But if your competitors, if you understand their velocity and how many links they're getting a month, as well as kind of what you're doing from a content side, your best bet is usually going to be really focusing a lot on site and the things that you do on your site instead of doing more outreach heavy things.
Mm-hmm.
So things like I'm trying to think. So one idea is you could build up like kind of like a library of like images that are free to use by other sites. And as you get more traffic, a lot of people see those images more and more. They'll grab them, put them on their site, and then hopefully they give you an attribution link. And if they don't, you can do link reclamation, which is usually just like a quick email, converts really well.
Yep.
But something like that, like that's going to scale well as you grow your traffic and grow your content. It's really going to be a lot more content focused, which I don't love talking about just because I feel like so many people talk about how link building is just content. And it really isn't that for the majority of us. I mean, that's why you're listening to a link building podcast right now, just because usually you don't hit publish and get hundreds of links.
Sure.
But with a more content focus, if you're especially producing content on a daily basis, I mean, content is going to be really the bread and butter of your link building strategy, which is just making sure that you're doing everything in your control to make it as shareable, as link worthy as possible. And that's really just coming down to doing your research, putting in the time, and really doing all that you can to make that content as great as it can be. So,
Yep.
I mean, it's not super actionable what I just told you, but it's definitely going to depend on the space you're in, but content is definitely going to be like the biggest portion.
Yeah, no, and that makes sense. And I mean, as well, a lot of the other strategies you already talked about will work. I mean, when it comes down to it, sounds like a lot of it will be competitor research. You can look at what your competitors are doing in your particular niche, and you can try to replicate a lot of that as well. So, no, I think those are good points for sure.
Yeah, and I mean, so I hate giving examples of the SEO industry just because a lot of people do, and it's so misleading to so many other people because building links to your SEO agency site is going to be a lot different than your average space just because we have such a broader knowledge of SEO and how the web works and stuff like that. So we're like, if you're trying to build links in a construction space or something like that, you're trying to do the same kind of outreach to a webmaster and they're just not going to care. Yeah. But I will say that like for my blog, like I would be really stupid if I were trying to rank for some different keywords in the SEO space by doing manual link building, just because looking at my competitors, they're not doing any manual link building. They're actually getting links at a velocity much higher than me just because they've got so much content out there that's actually like worth sharing and stuff like that. So if I did actually like legitimately focus my blog on building links, it would really be from a content side because that's the only way I can really scale it with just getting as many eyeballs and knowing that a lot of those eyeballs have their own sites.
And yeah, no, and that makes sense. And so, I mean, it's one thing to say, produce great content because people will share it. Maybe the question is, how do you get people to share it? I mean, maybe you have a blog that only gets 100 people coming a day, which really isn't very much, and not that many people are going to share it. Should you be syndicating content other places, or how do you get that content out there?
Yeah, so I think there's kind of like a chicken and the egg problem for a lot of new sites and a lot of like new blogs and content because a lot of the content heavy link building strategies are usually for sites that already have an audience. Right. So they've already got the eyeballs. And so all they need to do is give those eyeballs exactly what they're asking for, and then they'll kind of do it on their own. But it's like, if you produce great content on the blog and nobody reads it, is it really great content? Right. And so like you need to understand that like, so if you're a new site, you're going to have to do some manual stuff to get kind of started and get the ball rolling. And so, for you guys, you just published a lot of content, probably on some very low competition keywords. And so you didn't really need the links to rank. So that's an awesome strategy to get started, especially if the amount of link building opportunity in your space is very limited. But for when it isn't limited and you're willing to actually go after for a little bit more competition heavy keywords, then you might have to do some manual link building to start just to start ranking for some medium level keywords to get some eyeballs on it. But basically, as the rate of visitors goes up, the amount of manual stuff that you'll be doing offsite is going to definitely go down to a point where like any big publication today, the way that they're going to build links is to publish a great story, not to outreach to thousands of sites, because they've already got the people that are already interested in what they're producing and stuff like that. So it's definitely going to differ hugely off of what is your current situation in terms of your audience.
No, that makes complete sense. Definitely. So let's switch gears here just a little bit. One thing that I've talked about on my blog a number of times as a link building strategy is using expired domains. It's something that's a little bit more on the gray hat, black hat, whatever you want to call it, spectrum. Are you familiar with this process? I'm sure you are. And what are your thoughts on the strategy?
Yeah, so I probably should let you know before this, but I actually don't do a lot of expired domain link building.
Sure.
I've done some in the past, and I know that a lot of people do it really successfully and they scale it well. But for me, in terms of I'm generally like a low risk person. And so this was something that I know I'd actually invest a lot of time to really iron out all the details to make sure I was, using the right options, knowing what to look for when a domain expires, and knowing how to decide, for example, was all the authority of the links to it, was the page rank fake or was it real?
Right.
There's just a lot of different things that you have to learn from experience, and I realized it wasn't something that I really wanted to dive into. So I'm not saying it's bad at all. I know a lot of people are doing it really well, and it's ridiculous how it's like It's been working pretty well for kind of a long time, and you think Google would actually, perk their ears up, at this idea after a while, but it seems to be working like a charm still, for the people who know how to do it right. But if you don't know how to do it right, you could end up losing a lot of money just because sometimes paying for 5 or 6 of these expired domains for $100 a pop. I mean, that can add up pretty quickly.
Yeah, no, it really can. It is a complicated process, and it's something I've tried, if you will, with varying degrees of success. It's a huge learning curve that just depending on who you are, the amount you have to invest, the amount of time you have, for most people, it's probably something that they're not going to want to get involved with. But I just thought I'd ask for your opinion on that particular link building strategy, since it's a fairly unique one that people are using nowadays. So
yeah, and for beginners, I wouldn't recommend that be your first place
Definitely.
to stop.
Right.
But if you've been in the game for a while and you're willing to take some risks and trying to kind of sneak past Google in some aspects, then by all means go for it. I would not stop you.
Interesting. Very cool. So let's talk a little bit about the future of link building. I mean, Google has said a lot of different things as far as, you shouldn't be building links to your site, but then, Matt Cutts comes out and says, well, link building isn't illegal. There's certain things you can do. And then on top of that, Google is always making tons of changes for how they're ranking sites and different things. What is the future of link building from your perspective? What should people be focusing on when they're building links to their sites?
Yeah, so I honestly, I'm not a huge fan of a lot of posts that talk about the future of this, the future of that.
Sure.
Especially in such a fast-changing area. But honestly, like Google is relatively pretty slow with any big changes that they do, and they happen gradually. They'll even roll back certain updates just to make sure everything goes correctly and stuff.
Yeah.
So in a lot of trends, I mean, they haven't really changed direction anytime soon. So a lot of anything that automates or scales well, especially stuff that's publicly known, is obviously something that's on Google's radar. That they're eventually going to go after it. So obviously the future will not include those things nearly as much. But you also have to understand, like, if you can date back to the earliest things that Google targeted with their algorithms, and directories, reciprocal links even. I mean, and I even see people doing article directories right now. They're still doing that kind of stuff. And there's always going to be people that are going to get by that know how to do it in a certain way that basically, slips by Google. And what that basically comes down to is not leaving footprints and not doing it the same way as thousands of others, because Google really doesn't care about one spammer. They care about 1,000. And so as long as you're not doing the same things as anybody else, you can generally get by with a lot of what you're doing. But honestly, like from a futuristic perspective, it's pretty obvious that Google is trying to crack down on anything that scales, anything that could be deemed to manipulate. So like, whether it's, I don't really see something like broken link building being targeted, but it's been pretty obvious in terms of, from a content perspective, from a link building perspective, what they're going after. It's really no secret. So, obviously we all know that guest blogging is going to take a hit someday. Today it's still working like a charm for a lot of people, even like low quality stuff. And I'd recommend, like, if people are looking into like some more automated link building package type stuff, which I wouldn't recommend a beginner to do. But if you are, like, there's a lot of guest blocking services out there, and I know a few of that work like a charm.
Right.
And I can't tell you, because immediately if I tell somebody, then 1,000 other people start using it, and then Google goes after it. So it's kind of an obvious reason to kind of keep it to myself. But the point is, like, that it's been trending in certain ways for a really long time, and it's really not hard to decipher where we're going to be at in 3 or 4 years. It's really going to depend on how quickly Google is going to get to that point, and to what degree are they actually going to take action on it. So.
Yep. No, I agree. Google has kind of made clear what their intentions are, and they've, when it comes down to it, Google is based on a formula. It's a mathematical equation, if you will, that
exactly
links have always been really, that was the original, formula, and they're still going to be critical to that in the future. What links count for how much, and different strategies may change slightly, but I think your answer's spot on there for people to sort of look to the future of link building. I mean, they can kind of look at what the trends have already been leading up to this point and make their own deductions as to what that will be. So,
Yep.
So yeah, no, I appreciate your time coming on the show very much. If people wanted to get in touch with you or follow along, what's the best place for them to do that?
Yeah. And thanks, Spencer, so much for having me on. I definitely keep up with you. You're obviously doing amazing things, and it's just been great to chat with you today. But
Thanks.
places you can keep up with me. I've been very infrequent in terms of the updating I do really on anything. But I am on Twitter at point blank SEO.
Okay.
I try to keep my tweets pretty relevant to link building, but I will have some personal tweets. I am a big sports fan, so I might, send a tweet out about Tampa Bay Buccaneers losing or something like that. But so I'm on Twitter. I got my blog, pointblankseo.com, which again I'm very infrequent, so I'm not gonna, if you subscribe to RSS, I'm not gonna bug you too much. And then I also have my newsletter, which I generally keep it very targeted in terms of stuff I give out. It's generally pretty helpful stuff, and I don't think I'm very infrequent in terms of the stuff I do send out. So yeah, those were the three places you can kind of keep in touch.
No, that's great. I'll link to those in the after the show in the post, and so people can follow along there. Again, it's pointblankseo.com. Jon, it's been a pleasure having you on the show. I appreciate your time.
Yeah, thanks, Spencer. Appreciate it.
Thank you.